It's today in EVE Online, Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. I am Matterall. Okay, today we're going to start looking at some of the new changes to, well, what are those things? Engineering platforms or mining platforms. But before that, we're going to have a look at some of the stuff that's going on in the war. Some developments, a lot of them are creeping behind the scenes that we can't really point to, and we don't have evidence that what we think is happening is actually happening. So we can still speculate, but it's just speculation. But there's definitely things going on in the war, so we'll take a look at that. And we'll also take a look at the usual stuff. But today, basically, we're going to look at some of the new changes that have hit the Tranquility server and some of the stuff that's on its way. Okay, let's get started. We're looking at iHubs. That's what I always check in with because it kind of tells me what's going on with the landscape as far as people hostilely taking over other people's territory. And a couple of iHubs just came out just a few minutes ago. This one here, that's 1QH in Tenal, is coming out in 49 minutes. But there were two others up there that just came out. One of them belonged to Iron Crown. And that was kind of interesting because that iHub that just came out for Iron Crown was actually an outer passage. So I was thinking, what's Iron Crown doing in outer passage? They're part of Dead Coalition up in the north, so why would they have something coming out in the south? Well, it turns out that Iron Crown was with Winter Coalition, and they did live in outer passage a long time ago in 2019. But they basically, after Winter Coalition lost the war to Legacy Coalition, Iron Crown went to Guardians of the Galaxies, or as they're known, Dead Coalition. And that's where they've been ever since. And what we know of them recently is that with Dead Coalition retreating into decline, it looks like that alliance is folding into a corporation and moving into Goonswarm. So that was an interesting development. And that's a rumor. We don't know if they're actually moving to Goonswarm, but that's what was rumored. So to see them losing an iHub on the map, which was kind of interesting, especially in Outer Passage. But yeah, so that looks like that's what's going on there. Which is interesting because in a time of war, a group will be under fierce pressure, like a coalition of alliances, and some of those alliances will look for a better situation because they don't want to be on their back foot the whole time. So what they do is they look at their options. Do they stick with their group and stay loyal and see them through a hard time to possibly get a better situation later? There's advantages to that. If you're loyal and you stick with a group and that group ends up prospering somewhere else, you're known as a loyal member and you get some of the better picks of territory and that sort of stuff. But if you need something more immediate, you might look around for a different situation. So groups do all sorts of different things at this point. An alliance will go to lowsec and try to find some stability and some fun for their members. Or they'll look for a different situation in nullsec. So they'll go to either an ally that's stronger, or they may actually switch sides to a group that promises that they can keep their territory as long as they fight for their side. So there's all kinds of different options for groups. And that's what we're seeing. Well, that's what we think is happening behind the scenes with Dead Coalition. They must have a number of groups that are looking for a better situation. And if Iron Crown is headed down to hang out with Goonswarm, a more stable situation, that might actually be a logical solution for them. On the other hand, other groups are probably being talked to by Fraternity. In fact, I think there was something that came out from Naros, the leader of Fraternity, saying that if you guys wanted to switch sides, you could. That was something that came out on the Chinese medium. So if we translate it, you can see he's basically saying, come over to our side. we'll give you a place to stay and that sort of stuff. So that's what you want to look at in the Northern War. As Dead Coalition retreats, you may see some alliances form corporations and join other alliances instead. It really just depends on the hope that a group has. And if we look at the state of Dead Coalition, there was a message that came out from the leader of Siberian Squad, which I think is a Russian powerhouse inside of Dead Coalition. And it was a pretty frank and direct and honest assessment of their situation. It wasn't necessarily good, so we'll see. All right, also looking, you see in here, our first iHub that's coming out in just a few minutes is in Ranger Regiment in Tenal. Of course, that's already a foregone conclusion. Tenal has been taken over by PandaFam. You also have Deckline, Test Alliance. Oh, and VFK. Okay, so that one was just put down. So Test Alliance is also invading the north for their own reasons. And they attacked right into Deckline and took VFK. And in doing so, put down an iHub. So this is a counterattack that's happening here in Deckline at VFK. Test Alliance's new iHub has been put down, and it is being contested by Dead Coalition that still lives there. Outer Passage, you have Circle of Hell putting down their roots. So to see one of their iHubs have a timer on it, it might be somebody messing with their iHubs that are just now being put down. But because Circle of Hell is moving into Outer Passage, they're just arriving, and or they're Conoco, actually. They're just converting themselves over to Circle of Hell. Conoco was the alliance before. They are converting to Circle of Hell. I've heard they are renters for PandaFam, but they are not blue to Northern Coalition, so I don't really know what their status is. But for them to be in Outer Passage neighboring the other drone regions that belong to PandaFam, it's hard to think that they don't have some kind of diplomatic relations there. Then again, they might not. Other groups, well, there's nothing else here that's going to tell us a big story. So, but you do see little iHubs attacked all over the place that have timers. Let's move over to Dotland, take a look at the most violent systems. Okay, so last 24 hours in Nullsec has been Venal and Branch, which makes sense. So does Deckline. So the first, second, and fourth most violent systems are all the Northern War. And then you have Kalevala Expanse, which is an extension of that war. And then you have about fifth place, you have Delve, which might be typical for that area. And then you get back to the north, 6th, 7th place with Tribute and Tenal up there. So a lot of action in the north, which we know about, and some other stuff that looks rather typical. I don't see any spikes. Empire Regions looks like the trade hubs are getting hammered as usual, and some of the surrounding areas. And then, of course, Black Rise. Most violent systems, nothing in the last 3 hours worth noting. Most is S-TAC-E, which has 39 ships destroyed in the last 3 hours. Not a big skirmish there. But in the last 24 hours, most violent system, again, not a very big fight here. 161 ships destroyed, 131 pods destroyed. Boy, that looks like people just self-destructed, because that's a pretty high ratio of pods to ships being destroyed. Usually a pod can get out. But that's PF TAC. I think that is where Goons and Horde are skirmishing quite a bit. If we go down to the second spot, there's 210 ships destroyed, but 77 pods, escape pods, of those 210 were destroyed. And that's more like it. That's where the ratio should really be. Ships get destroyed. You want the escape pod to escape, because then that person has to fly that escape pod back home. It might be 5 or 6 jumps, or 10 or 15, but it takes them out of action. If you destroy a pod, they will jump clone Their corpse will be destroyed, but their information jumps into a clone at their home base. So you're basically sending them home for free when you destroy a pod. So a lot of times in a battle, you don't want to destroy an escape pod. You want them to have to fly that thing home to grab a new ship. And so at 5 TAC PY2 in branch, there's 210 ships destroyed. The last 24 hours, that's maybe one or two fights. Most violent systems in lowsec, the usual suspects, Tama, Rancer, and Nenamaila, all in the first 3 spots. And for the 24-hour mark, looks like Nenamaila in Black Rise is pretty active. I don't know what's going on there, but that 540 ships in the last 24 hours is a lot of ships for lowsec. Tama, for instance, is at 320, but Tama is always at the top of the list, so I don't know what's going on here. Let's take a peek. We'll capture this system here. Z-Kill board, where are you? Here. So we're taking a look at Black Rise, see what's going on here. We're talking about the last 24 hours, so there's a variety of ships. Oh, it looks like Trigger Happy is in here. Or maybe just a few. Let me also make sure that I'm looking at Twitch, in case you guys know and you can tell me what's going on there. All right, so on the 12th, February 12th, I'm seeing very mixed casualties, so that tells me it's just activity, or possibly a purple roam where people come from different alliances to play together. But I don't see this Templess, Calcif, that's Faction War. Yeah, I don't know. Another thing you can do if you want to see if these things are all related is just pick one. Like, maybe I'll just do the Templess one since I know those guys. Or here I see 3 ships. No, those are pods. 2 ships with pods. I'll just pick a group. Like pen here. Click on that and then see if I can hit the related button here. What this does is it kind of groups up ships. So you have 10 on 10 in disengagement. So it looks like those look like gangs. It could actually be just a lot of activity in that system. We shall see. So I don't know the answer to that. There's nothing conclusive looking at the kill boards. But Black Rise system, Nenamaila, pretty active in the last 24 hours. Over 500 ships destroyed there. Okay, we'll move on to most active systems in general. And we may not visit this for a while because it seems to be the same pattern over and over again of Oasa just being the NPC capital of the world right now. They dominate the last 3 hours and the last 24 hours as well. They would have dominated the top 10 spots, except spot 5 and 6 are taken up by Paragon Falls, or a couple systems in Paragon Falls. And that's also Chinese players, I believe, in Paragon Falls. Let me double check. No, it's also Fraternity, so it really is Fraternity. Those guys are working hard. I think the next MER is going to be explosive for them. The last MER, Monthly Economic Report, showed that there was a lot of activity in fraternity space. So there's a lot of people really making money ratting. And this is important, especially now with the new changes that came in yesterday, and I'll explain why. But last month in the monthly economic report, they had Fraternity or Winter Coalition had a really, really good and surprising turnout for NPC ratting income. They almost made, in OWASA alone, they almost made 2/3 of what was made in Delve, which is a lot because Delve has dominated this pretty well. I mean, there was early competition with Dead Coalition in the north against Delve. They were both ratting quite a bit, but that was 2018, and and Goonswarm or the Imperium or Delve basically sent some SIGs up there to really hassle them out of being able to NPC, and that led to all of 2018 massive wars, and so that really destroyed their ability to compete with Delve. So Delve really became singular in NPC ratting, and nobody else really came close. And then you see Winter Coalition emerge, and they were ratting quite a bit. When we say ratting, we're talking about killing NPCs for money, for bounties. So it's basically making money. So ratting in Winter Coalition was always pretty good, and that really helped a lot of their, active defense, ADMs, active defense modifiers. And that helped protect their territory. But when Blackout hit, that all came to a halt, and their ADMs dropped significantly, causing them to really destabilize and lose the war to Test. They might have lost the war anyway over time, but they really were holding their own for a long time when they had Elo Knight being their admiral and really fighting the war for them, and they were ratting like crazy to hold their ADMs high to keep their defenses really high. So since then, the war is over, and Fraternity and the Winter Coalition, for the most part, retreated to Drones area that's a little bit further away from Test, and also right next to a strong ally in the form of Northern Coalition and Pandemic Legion and Horde. So it's a little bit safer for them, and they've gone back to work in ratting, and sure enough, in January, the numbers came out for December, and those numbers were significant. They had ratted not only 2/3 in OWASA, but the following two systems, or two systems out of the three, also belong to Winter Coalition. So they really had like 3 systems going, or belonged to PandaFam. It could have been PandaFam as well. And the point that I'm making is, last month we were shocked at the amount of NPC ratting that was happening outside of Delve. It was, if you added it all up, it was more than Delve. This next month, I'm curious to see if OWASA itself passes Delve. That'll be really interesting. So we'll check that out. But again, there's no surprises in most active systems here for NPCs. It's OWASA. Delve shows up one time, one system here at number 8 for the last 24 hours. You had nearly 40,000 NPCs destroyed in PS TAC 94K. But other than that, it's dominated by Chinese players, mostly in OWASA. Let's move this out of the way. All right, taking a quick look. Live now is Russian player Lucy Liu, I think, on YouTube. But we're looking, there's patch notes from Jinton. There's a video for that. We're looking at videos that came out yesterday. A lot of the videos these days are Russian. I'm looking at maybe 15 to 20 videos. Almost all of them are Russian videos. So there's some prolific Russian players putting out videos. Release theme music for EVE Online. I don't think that's new. Again, and here you have, I believe that's Chinese writing. But really only one of those. And then you get to English after a while. But wow, I'm really, I think this is Korean here. So all this to say, for people who can't see, I'm looking at about 20, 25 videos, and most of them are actually in Russian. And you see a little in Chinese and Korean, and you see a lot smaller percentage of English language YouTube videos for EVE Online. So not a lot being produced for EVE Online on YouTube. We produce a lot of stuff for YouTube. Any of these morning shows actually end up over there for archiving sake. And we also put out a podcast for this exact broadcast. So you catch that every day on your Today in EVE Online podcast stream. It is not on the Talking in Stations stream. We did that on purpose so that it didn't get flooded. Okay, looking at Tweet Fleet. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about next. I invite you to join me in Talking in Stations Discord if you want to talk about the industrial changes. Just jump in. And yesterday we had maybe 30, 40 people talking all day long about the patch notes and what was going on. We had extended programs for you. We had 1 hour with me, and then we had an additional 2 hours with Lichgrave talking about the patch notes. We had Sort Dragon in there, Dirk McGurk, Brisk Ball, a lot of faces that you would know from other shows. But also you had expert players in there that were talking about some of the changes. So we'll get that released today. That didn't go out yesterday for the podcast version, but you can always find that on YouTube. Talking in Stations YouTube, look it up by name. So what's big in Tweet Fleet? Let's have a look here. And Tweet Fleet, for those who don't know, is the hashtag group on Twitter for EVE Online. It's community-based, so it's not complete, but it is, it is what it is. Hey, what's up, Sadus from Goonswarm?
Hey, not too much. How you doing?
Real good, man. Good to see you. Okay, just looking at Tweet Fleet here. Healthier mineral. Okay, so this is a note from EVE Online. Last December, the endeavor towards a healthier mineral distribution throughout New Eden began. During the next release, a significant change in how minerals are distributed on moons is planned. And this is important because they just changed the way minerals were distributed for asteroids. So this is the second, I would say, the other foot to drop on this. One of the things I want to go back to that I didn't quite finish was the reason that it's important that OASA is doing so much ratting is because because they might overcome Delve this next monthly economic report. But even if they do overcome Delve surpassed everyone by far in mining. And now we see that there are mining changes that are going to essentially, I would say, nerf a lot of the mineral production that's happening with all the harvesting.
Well, there is that matter all, but if you take a look at the Goonswarm Federation, we built up so many materials. Like we've been mining a lot for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So really it nerfs everyone else more than us because we have so many materials that no one else does. And how can you catch up in this kind of a depleted environment?
Absolutely, and that's the point that I was going to get to after well, let's just transition then over to moon mineral distribution and how that's changing. I haven't read this dev blog yet. Have you read it?
I have.
What's in it?
Oh, you're gonna give me a quiz and
No,
say through
if
to the
you don't
point?
know, that's cool. I can actually just read it real quick. But since I haven't read it, I don't know what's going on here. It's not very long.
It's not that long, but I think they had to do something, and I think I can agree with that. But it is challenging when we're just getting over blackout OSIS or whatever you want to call it, where that hurt the player base so much. To have another thing that hits morale like this, it is not a very good thing to have. It, I'm not a huge fan of it, but they're doing what they need to do.
Yeah, but what's in here? What do we know what's in here? I can actually just read it real quick.
Um, it's it's severe depletion on the asteroid clusters, and that is hitting everyone. It's Moons are going to have less or none of the standard minerals, and it just changes up the entire balance of where and
Oh,
how you get resources. And I think their plan is to create massive shortages to reset the economy.
yeah. And you make a really strong point. So, okay, the reason it's hard to say is because this looks like it's more of a plan than any kind of announcement. So, you have a shortage phase and you have a redistribution phase, then you have a dynamic distribution phase. I don't know if it gives a timeline.
It doesn't, but one of the things we've always complained to CCP about is you are not giving us a roadmap or an idea as to what's coming. The one thing I did like about this announcement is they are saying this is step one of a plan. I'm just
Mhm.
hoping they don't do the classic CCP, only do the first step of the plan.
Yeah, I don't. I think this is something that at least Caleb has been asking for, so we'll see if it works out. Upcoming mineral Okay, so it does have a timeline for, not a timeline, but it says right here, the next step is going live next month. So it's not this month; it'll be next month. I think that's when they're going to hit moons. So this month they hit asteroids and reduce the amount those give out, especially nullsec. Next month they're hitting moons, and you won't be able to get typical minerals from moons, so you won't get that byproduct.
Hmm.
And then you see a dynamic redistribution phase. I'm not sure what that is going to be.
I'm pretty sure that means that when they have a moon and you frack it, or you have an asteroid and you frack it, you don't know exactly what you're going to get, so you won't have necessarily, that R64 moon won't have all the exact same stuff it does right now. That would be the most sensible thing they could do. Um, it
Oh, it's going to be a surprise every time you moon
I th-
mine.
well, that's what I pick up from the word dynamic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Or it could mean dynamic in that for this month you get pretty good stuff, but next month it might actually not be as plentiful.
Well, yeah, and I think it would be ridiculous for them to have, if it's an R64 moon, for it not to drop R64 things. But I think they'll probably play with the percentages as to what drops each month based on your frac and how long it is, and you basically get some RNG. And everyone loves RNG so much.
Yeah.
So basically, you can jackpot or you can get nothing. We'll see.
Okay, sorry. Just had a crackdown on Discord public because people are starting to go nuts. So I'll have to tell them I'll lock Discord if they don't behave. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, this is going to be very interesting. We'll get into this in just a second a little further. I did want to emphasize your point, which I wanted to come to, which is this is going to hurt. This is going to slow everybody down. But the people who already have stockpiles, that's going to become more valuable. So this is actually a plus for people
Like
who have
I'm,
large stores.
I'm sitting on 100 billion isk or so worth of minerals. I couldn't be happier with this change personally.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's going to triple or quadruple in price, and I'll just be even more filthy rich.
Yeah. But over time, I wonder how long you think that would take to deplete. Are we talking like a year here? Or are we talking 3 years? Or never?
All depends on whether they can find a way to drive conflict.
Right. And how much
But
can
right
get
now,
destroyed?
right now, if I have dread sitting around, I'm holding on to them. I'm buying up dread so that I can reprocess them into materials, because the material is going to be worth more than the ship pretty soon.
Right. That's almost always the case, isn't it? When somebody takes it to the next tier, right? Because you have asteroids, right? So you collect asteroids, but then you refine asteroids. That's the next level up. Then you take what you refined from those asteroids and you build basic pieces. That's the next level up. They take those basic pieces and you create sometimes mid level pieces, sometimes final products. And it keeps going like that. And so there are many layers of production. And every time that you move up a tier, the item is worth a bit more because some work has gone into it.
Except when there's a supply shock, such as this, and then all of a sudden the base materials spike in price. So if this base materials spike in price, and you have something that's tech 3, you can make a quick buck by, salvaging everything you have and just selling it.
Right. Unloading it where the price is highest for that shock. Yeah.
Yes. Macroeconomics.
Yeah. And I think that's where, I mean, how easy is it for a player that doesn't know the environment that well, doesn't know the trends that well? How easy is it to see those bubbles and to be able to act on it if you're relatively a new and ambitious player that wants to do some industrial stuff?
Are you willing to listen, people, or are you the sort who pretends that they're right on everything?
Because if you think you're right on everything, you're going to miss those opportunities.
Yeah.
And if you listen to experienced people, you might be able to see them.
Yeah, when they give you advice and your response is, "Okay, boomer," probably they're not gonna make any money. But if they're willing to listen and say, "Oh, there's a hole in the market there. I wanna take part in that," they'll benefit, but they don't have the base resources to do quite as well, right? So if I'm operating with 400 billion ISK and I make a 20% profit, I'm making a ton of money. If they're dealing with 10 billion ISK and they make a 20% profit, they have 2 billion ISK. That matters, but economies of scale and all that.
Right. And it gets very interesting because that's the player built economy, right? And so there's built in costs, there's built in time sinks. Some people are really efficient and some people are not. Some people are making large volumes and some people are not. So there's a lot of different factors that go in there, but you kind of know what those factors are. What you don't know is the stuff that's picked up by loot. And some of that is actually the same stuff that you can build. So it's very interesting when CCP is messing with loot tables, because if they create modules that start dropping more regularly that are superior to what players can build, that can sag your product sales for that now less wanted item.
I would say that's true, but CCP has shown a history of not being very good at being able to select appropriate things on the loot tables to sag the economy in a targeted way.
In a targeted
If you
way.
if you get what I'm saying,
Right. Yeah. But
they
it's random, or it looks more random than it looks like it's targeted from CCP.
yeah, they're just doing a blanket. They're doing band-aid fast, do too much and then roll it back a little bit later. That's what it looks like to me. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't even know if I expect them to look at the economy and target. So I don't see a problem with that. They're just looking at when they're trying to balance. This is why it gets hard to balance. I think because you have to balance ships, but then you have to balance modules too. And both modules and ships together create fittings, preferred fittings. And then you add scale, whether it's a small group or a large group, you add that factor in. And now you have stuff that really works well in small numbers and then works incredibly well at large numbers. And CCP has to balance for that factor as well. So they have to balance ships, modules, fittings, doctrines. And so you can see why they get into a lot of trouble when they pick this knob to turn as opposed to this knob to turn. So if they're looking at tier sighting modules to affect the player economy, that must be like the seventh or eighth factor that they're looking at. I think most of the time they're just looking at how people are using it as weaponry, not how it sells on the market. So they're probably not targeting any modules for redundancy purposes in the player built economy.
I think that's fair. And I think you'll see that looted modules actually start getting used a little bit more as produced ones become more expensive. And I don't know, anything that can benefit people from being in space blowing up stuff, I'm typically not against.
Right. Well, because that creates the waste that you need in order to, you know, buy
Well,
create the
yeah,
demand.
people out there harvesting or, you know, that's how producers make money. That's how they make money. That's how people who are going out to hunt folks are out there hunting for the people who are dratting and everything. So you need the people out there gathering and farming and doing all that other good stuff so that everyone else has targets. And then it has to be profitable enough for them that they're going to keep doing it. So there does need to be money there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the way people incentivize themselves to do more of a thing.
Well, why would you go ratting and mining if you knew you were going to lose money every time? It doesn't make sense, right? So I
Yeah.
think that this is a way that their salvage will become worth more. It's going to realign parts of the economy. Um, we've been warning and talking about how overbalanced roracles were for years now, and I guess this is about the only way they figured to do it because for us, we've hit that economies of scales thing where no matter what they do, we're still going to be able to mine. If there's rocks to mine, we're going to get it done.
Right. For those that are new or don't know, the Rorqual is essentially the capital ship for mining that exists, and it got a boost. Maybe what's it been now? 3 or 4 years,
Yeah,
and
and
they were
it's
incredible.
caused hyperinflation.
Yeah. But what's interesting is, and they've nerfed the Rorqual maybe 5 or 6 times since then. It took a
Oh,
while,
into the
but they did.
ground.
Yeah.
They've
Well,
they've they've nerfed the heck out of it.
yeah. Well, they nerfed its own power as the ship. They also nerfed in different ways, not just a direct way, but they've nerfed the mining capability by nerfing the drones that it uses to mine. And now they're nerfing what it can mine and how frequent it can mine. So they're nerfing not just the ship, but the methods the ship uses to mine, and now they're actually nerfing what it mines. That's what
The
this looks like.
one thing that I hope that they don't do is, you know, we it's a challenge for everyone in the player base. I'm just going to use an everyone clause here, which I normally don't do. For groups that set up, do the infrastructure work, and do all that good stuff, there does need to be some reward for that. And if there is no reward, that means that the people doing a lot of the grunt work and a lot of the stuff that helps set up and build empires, there's no point to them doing it anymore. And my worry about changes like this is if you de-incentivize those critical hyper autistic people who enjoy doing things like logistics and setting things up and ensuring that infrastructure is in place, that is not good for the game because there's only so many of those and they're spread across the major alliances, and having a couple of those is critical, right?
Right. There's Tuzzy for you guys, right? Does a lot of that work. And
Hmm.
for Northern Coalition, it's Rebecca does that kind of work.
But it's
Um,
really like 10, 12 people across
yeah.
the whole game.
Yeah, they're massively valuable players because they have the knowledge and the will and the willpower and time to do a lot of the heavy industrial and logistic work for alliances.
And they create so much content for everyone in their alliance,
Hmm.
and that has a trickle down effect on more people in space, more people traveling, all of these things. There's a few critical people that if you disincentivize certain things, it's bad. I'm just that's what I'm nervous.
Yeah, but does the I think also you may disincentivize those 10 people because they put in a lot of work and you're making their work harder. You're taxing, I love this term, taxing their man hours. In other words, taking a lot of profit out of the amount of work that they put into the game. So you are diminishing their desire to do what they do. At some point, you will break them and they'll say, I don't want to do this anymore. But by lowering that ceiling, are you not raising the floor for people to get into this sort of a thing?
So if the argument is you're going to make it more of a pain in the tuchus, I won't swear on your podcast,
Thanks.
but you're making it more of a pain in the tuchus for people to get into this in the first place. No one's good. You can't. It's something you can't do at a small scale. It's okay. Rebecca has a jump bridge network. She probably has two people that help her do that, all for Northern Coalition. Okay, I am a small entering new alliance. How do I do logistics like that? Like, what's my entry point? Does this make sense? Because if it actually by raising the barrier to entry
Hmm.
or removing the benefit for doing it, it makes it less likely that more people are going to step up and do it.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the changes then, doesn't it? Like, do, do the changes hit the exponential the exponential abilities that you might have, for instance, for one person to control so much logistical stuff. Um, can you make a change that ratchets that down a bit without affecting the smaller groups? It's usually hard to do because really the big groups are just made of smaller groups. So,
Yeah, I can buy that. And overall, we'll do okay. As a group over in Goonswarm, we'll roll with whatever changes they make. But
mhm,
when they make a change like this that makes it a lot harder to do something, they are hitting that new player, and that'd be my main concern because I don't know about what you guys are doing, but we're putting an awful lot of work into training players, showing them how to be profitable, showing them how to enjoy the game, not just going out and doing missions, but going out and being on fleets, being involved with mining, ratting, whatever they feel like doing.
mhm.
And it's a lot more challenging to retain new people when they don't see the benefit of what they're doing, or when they feel that it's just stacked against them. It's a challenge.
Right. They need to see the benefit. The question is, how outlandish is the benefit if what you're expecting to get is 1,000 units of a thing, but the reality is you really can only earn 40 or 50?
Well, until the price shock hits, i.e., supply gets eaten up,
Oh yeah, good point.
there's not going to be a benefit. Because if you have 100 units of something, it's worth 1,000 ISK each. Then you've got 10,000 or whatever it is ISK. If you have one unit worth 10,000, it's still worth the same amount in terms of money.
Hmm.
So the price shocks have to hit, and with the 15 years of history in the game, there's a lot of price shocks to get past before a lot of supply is built up to accommodate demand, probably for the better side of a year.
Yeah. You know, here's the thing. Sometimes the price shock, well, I wouldn't call it a price shock, but the stockpiles never run out. There are still gargantuan amounts of stockpiles that I'm thinking of PI materials before they were
Hmm.
mined through planets. They were just given, you could just buy them off vendors for dirt cheap. And people bought gazillions of those and they still haven't burned through those stockpiles. And it's been 10 years. So maybe you never, in some cases, you may never burn through stockpiles and that price may never normalize. And so that product and the incentives to make it or to use it are never going to materialize. But I
Well,
think
it's like,
the biggest way that money and items leave this game are when players leave the game.
yeah, but what you're seeing now is when players leave, they tend to there tends to be an inheritance. Hey, I'm going to leave. The only way I'm going to win this game for good is if I give away most of my stuff. I'm going to do that. If I come back, just set me back up. That happens, and I'm not seeing that massive attrition in terms of people leaving with their stuff. It's usually okay. We'll put this in this station. Don't waste it. But if I come back, I'll want it. But keep going with your production facility.
Yeah.
At least in groups that have been together for a long time, and that's not a bad thing because why wouldn't you support your online friends when you're not going to play the game anymore?
Yeah. I almost think that early on, CCP should have taken what we call a death tax in real life, right? Like when you try
I,
to pass on inheritance.
I think that becomes a mess in a hurry.
Probably,
Uh,
but it would have, I mean,
how in with a death tax? Okay,
or inheritance tax, whatever
uh,
you want to call it.
ahead of time, I don't know that Chuck Chuck is quitting the game,
Mhm.
so he gives me 1,000 geckos. Then, oh, he unsubscribes in 2 months. Where do you actually tax someone? Because how do you tax someone without you know it being an actual trade? Because that's how these things happen. You have a shared you have a shared cargo hold somewhere or a shared office in your alt corp. All that stuff is sitting in an alt corp office somewhere. Okay, how do you tax that? Because two people have access to it. Things are tied to a specific person, and I don't see any method by which they'd be able to do that, or
Yeah.
really what the benefit is.
Well, the way that you're right, there's almost no methods to do that. The only way I can think of is that you tax every transition a percentage of the worth of the item, everything, even if you trade. And the only time something's not taxed is creation. And if you create into a hanger, then that's the place where you could, creation to its first arrival at a hangar. At that point, every time it's traded between players, you tax it a certain percentage. It would hurt, but it would nullify, I think, the great inheritance that is always left behind, the piles of money
But
left behind.
why would you want to do that?
I think it would restrict the economy even more, which is what we're looking for, right? At the end of the day, we want things to have, I think, value enough for people to make it, but also not so much value that people don't use it.
Well, I can see that in some ways. However, okay, I've got 8 accounts and they all share some hangers. Should I pay taxes when I put things into a hanger? Like there's no mechanism that could support that because, well, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, we've got into. I'm sorry, I took you down a
Sorry, I,
theoretical.
I rabbit holed you.
I totally took you down a theoretical, and this we can have like another time. But I think it's interesting what we're talking about. What you and I are playing with are ideas on how you can have the economy have some value without locking new players out, but also not discouraging old players. And so what this relates to is this new mineral distribution announcement that's made. And what we are seeing is that there's going to be 3 steps, it looks like, or phases.
Hmm.
The shortage phase, the redistribution phase, the dynamic phase of minerals, I think. Or is it all? Yeah, it's minerals, right? So salvage isn't touched by this, and neither is um, planetary interactive materials. This is
Yep.
really just minerals.
And right now it's just asteroids.
Right. But it's going to be moon minerals as well, which are a different. Are they considered asteroids?
Nope.
So that's a different material. So it's.
You always have to think in terms of CCP has really old code and it's not very well done. So it's very hard for them to make global changes to everything in what we consider one system.
Mm-hmm,
Because the Athenors that pull moon materials up over in Nullsec or in lowsec, uh, they they operate using the new Citadel code, and it's not attached to the old iHubs that were there. There is a check on that, but for them to make changes, they're dealing with really old, terribly done Python,
mm-hmm.
and so they try to keep them separate so that they don't have unintended consequences. And it kind of, if you think of all of their changes from that perspective, they can't go too deep into the hay pile and make a change. So this is a cosmetic type of change. They're seeing how it operates. And then if it operates the way they expect, I expect them to go to the next hay pile over and make a little adjustment. Because really, to change the amount of materials that's in a asteroid, it's a massive economic impact. But from a coding perspective, it's not that big.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question from somebody who's popped in here. It's kind of a funny circumstance for a question, too. The circumstance is this, just so you guys are on the inside on this joke, but Talking in Stations Discord has a way of keeping bots out. When you first join the server, you have to type not a bot with a dash in front of it to prove that you're human, because a bot wouldn't be able to do that, or at least someone would have to program it, and that would take extra work. So anyway, so we don't get bots that menace our population. And we're only a little over 3,100 people big. That's not that big, but even smaller discords have been menaced by bots. So that's why we put that safety thing in. So we have a little
Hmm.
containment room that you enter into, and you have to write that not a bot. And that's where I'm getting a question, because I think somebody couldn't make it past there. So I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, the question is, and maybe you can answer it, how do you think SRPs are going to be affected on alliance levels, and how quick will they be affected?
So I'm going to give you the Goonswarm answer. Wow, is that a good question for finance? Uh, I think that I, I
Different
one of
department.
the things I one of the things I know is I don't stick my nose where it doesn't belong in Goonswarm. I deal with certain things, but it's a finance question. I think it would be ludicrous for a change like this not to have some impact.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of kicking around. I only caught parts of it yesterday, but a lot of kicking around about people may become reluctant to start using T1 ships, or I don't know. There was going to be like, they were predicting there would be a wave of usage of ships from
Mm.
T1 to T2. But now that moon mining is going to be redistributed as well, it looks like you may get T2 start to be used less. Who knows? We go to T3 after that. It just,
No, I don't really buy that. It's
mm,
more, um, I think it's going to be when you get SRP more than what you get SRP on. And if you take out 200 Tristans, it's not that much materials to start with. It's not a significant pile. If you take out 200 Myrmidons, replacing that from a materials perspective, significantly bigger.
mhm.
And I think it'll actually lead to more T2 and T3 ships because, well, all of that stuff is still existing.
Right. That's, I think, what I heard. There would be T2 and T3 stuff would become more. I don't know. Actually, these changes are very interesting because you have a lot of wormhole changes that are going to make possibly moving through wormholes more
Like,
desirable, which means you use smaller ships, smaller, more potent ships like T3 ships.
I want them to get those filaments back, those warp you somewhere active in space. That'd be fantastic. And like, oh, but I see Nick Bison's question.
Yeah.
Is it going to eat up the stockpiles? Okay. Personally, and just myself, I'm sitting on 8 years of T3 salvage that I've never sold. And I know there's a ton of people in my just waiting for the price to spike. Like I was ratting in wormholes for 8 years grabbing T3 salvage. And I just have it all sitting in one system. I would love for the price on that stuff to spike. It would be great. And there's a ton of people like me.
And that's not the only thing you guys have stockpiles for.
I'm still sitting on 3,000 geckos.
Wow. Really? But
Yeah,
those have like doubled in price recently. Why haven't you unloaded those? They're hard to unload
I
fast.
bought them all when they came out between 25 and 50 million ISK. I bought all of them.
Yeah.
So that's like the rest of the economy doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. So for reference, those were 25 million, I think, when they first came out, and they went up to about 100 million and stabilized for a long time. And then they started sagging to about 80 million when it was announced that they would drop as loot, because these are rare drones that do omni damage. They do all forms of damage. So that's an advantage for them. But
But they've never dropped.
but they haven't dropped. Right. So the price started going back up. And now, because there's a doctrine that uses them, I believe they are at 100 and I believe 140 million each.
So oddly enough, I'm rich again.
Yeah. If you wait long enough, you'll be rich again. But it could take years. How many? 3,000?
Yeah, 3,000 right now.
I thought I had a lot with like 100.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
but there for every rare material, there's 5 people with my story,
Hmm.
and you know, getting past like people would have to lose a lot of geckos for me to be able to get my money back. But I'm never going to flood the market. I want the price at 125, 140 million. I keep it there, and I know everyone else who has them, and we kind of have a deal.
Are they all in Goonswarm?
No,
So you financiers know each other from different alliances, different
yeah,
coalitions?
yeah. Well, I know who they are because I used to spy on some of their alliances, and then I just reached out to them in game, and we had started having conversations.
Do you price fix?
Of course.
Oh, interesting. How many different things do you worry about when you're price fixing?
I worry entirely about price. I don't give a shit about demand. Sorry, I
No,
don't give a heck about demand.
no, but how many different items do you like kind of watch?
I only watch 4 items in the game because that's what I have a lot of money in.
Right. One of
Now,
them is geckos.
yep, one of them's geckos.
Are you willing to say what the other ones are, or do you want to keep that to yourself?
I'll keep those to myself.
I figured.
But
But
well, it's no secret. I'm pretty public about having an awful lot of the geckos.
so that's okay to put out there. I ask because I knew the answer beforehand that not everybody watches everything. So everybody has a limited amount of things that they look at, that they specialize in or have a vested interest in. Some people it will be like Sadus here will be geckos, but other places, other people might be looking at a certain component that's important to, PI structure building.
And that's healthy. Like people should focus on that. One of the things that I think a lot of alliances don't have that we do, we have channels for people who want to make money and want to start speculating. And folks like me will say, "Hey, we're expecting a price spike in this area sometime soon. You might want to put some money into it." And people will drop a billion, 2, 3, 5 billion ISK into something. And then when the price spike hits, that's great. Like if you remember a few years back when heavy water spiked like crazy,
Yeah.
it like tripled. I bought all the heavy water in Pandemic Horde, Pandemic Legion, Jita, and in Sword Dragon Space, all in one day. And then I sold it all over the next couple weeks. But I had told everyone in GSISC I was going to do it. So everyone who actually listened made a ton of money.
Yeah, that was dirt cheap and it popped up.
Yeah, because I wanted it to pop up. And I made about 200 billion ISK on that deal.
Okay, so there wasn't any mechanic that changed. It was just you cornering the
It was
market.
me personally. Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Howdy.
Hey, how you doing, Dazzling? I've mined a lot of you. You must hate me.
Dazzling is Dazzling Spodomane, which is an actual asteroid.
I remember the first time you managed to butcher that.
Oh, yeah. Spodinimium.
Nice.
All right, let's see if we can get Dunk Dinkle in here from CSM to explain these mining changes, since I don't think I've done them justice.
And the nice thing is now they can actually talk about them because other than cryptic comments from CCP for a while saying that there's resource changes coming, there's the CSM was actually really nice and tight-lipped on this one, which is
Well, there was a message came out from Aerith saying it's the beginning of the end.
I've seen that
Wouldn't be the
message how many
first time.
times?
It's not the first time.
Have you ever met Aerith?
Yeah. It's not the first time you've heard that. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dunk, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm working off my phone because work blocks Discord otherwise. But
It's
I don't
pretty
know if
clear
that's-
actually for a phone.
Are
So
you
I
saying
just
that are you saying that Discord has security holes?
It's more firewall blockage than
Yeah.
security. So I just wanted to go over what the actual changes are that have been announced in a way for people to kind of get it without getting into the what could happen side of it, just so people are clear about that. Is that okay?
That'd be great. Really need that. Thanks.
So the first thing that was noticed and before the later announcement was that the size of the asteroids in the anomalies in Nullsec had been reduced basically by 90 to 95%. And why that matters is the size of the asteroid matters for Rorqual mining. So Rorquals are designed to mine very large asteroids, and the size of an asteroid is measured in its cubic meters. And so you would have these very large asteroids that the Rorquals would use their excavator drones on. And because the excavators mine so quickly, they need large rocks to mine from. So the smaller rocks were typically left for the subcapital mining ships, the barges, to handle, because the time it takes to have the excavators move and mine and all that is very inefficient.
Dunk, may I ask for a clarification?
Sure.
Is it just the large rocks or is it all rocks in the anomalies?
There are no more large rocks in the anomaly. So the change was the size of the rocks has been reduced. So in the past, you'd have very large spodomane rocks, and the Rorquals would mine those, and they'd get a few cycles in. Now, the size of the rocks is all very, very small in comparison. And so then the Rorqual pilots are faced with this dilemma of they're spending money to engage their Indy core to basically go into Rorqual mining mode. And suddenly it doesn't make any sense to mine small rocks with Rorquals and excavators. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
No, it's just the cycle time. You'll burn a cycle and the rock will be gone. So why would you waste that heavy water instead of going
Well,
out there
there's the
with
heavy
5?
water, then there's moving the excavator drones, because typically the Rorqual pilots want to keep their excavator drones close to them in case they get attacked. So
Yep.
they don't want to send the excavator drones. They don't want to send that 2.5 to 5 billion ISK. They don't want to send it far away. So the impact of that is seen by the players is that the use of Rorquals in Nullsec anomalies to mine has gone in the traditional sense of that they would go out there and mine.
Now, the counter to that is using miner 2s with the Indy core on.
There are ways and things like that, yes, but the purpose of the Rorqual was to use the excavator drones. So that has been removed. And so then you do a new calculation and what's the optimal mining for small things. And so the concern is that there is no role in anomalies for Rorquals anymore to do mining. They may provide boosts, but as a mining ship, they don't have a role.
Yeah, it's just compression and boosting at this point.
Right. So that changes very much. The second change that has occurred is there's an ore called crocite, and crocite has the most noxium, which is a mineral in it. And noxium is needed in building everything in Eve. All crocite asteroids have been removed from Nullsec. They don't exist in Nullsec anymore. So the source of noxium in Nullsec has been removed completely. It only exists majorly in lowsec and a teeny amount in highsec. So what has been created is an industrial hole in supply for this mineral noxium that's required for everything because it doesn't exist in Nullsec anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes us dependent on importing for financial.
Right. So what people are concerned about again is you can't really buy noxium right now on the market at any reasonable price. All crocite is gone in every trade hub. And so this industrial shock is occurring now. And I know people feel that there are these large stockpiles of ore. I personally don't believe these stockpiles of ore exist other than in arbitrage traders. I don't believe they exist for the large coalitions. And then the third thing that has been announced but has not occurred yet is that when a moon with an Athanor or Tatara on it is popped after the moon drill executes, there would be the traditional moon ore that has the moon materials that get turned into T2 products. But there would also be a bunch of normal asteroid ore that had minerals in it. And what's been announced in the dev blog is that the moons will no longer have asteroid ore with them at all. So
they're
in the first few hours, the quick thinking people were like, okay, we won't mine in anomalies anymore. We'll just go to moons that we know have lots of asteroid ore, because if you open up a moon when you're setting the timer or when it pops, you will see how much asteroid ore pops in addition with the moon ore. And some people mine moons simply for the asteroid ore. All of those asteroid ores are disappearing. So what you're going to be left with is moons will only drop moon ore per the announcement. And moon ore has just a teeny amount of traditional minerals alongside with the moon materials. So what you're seeing is a reduction overall in, number one, the ability for things for Rorquals to do. So as it appears now and has been discussed, the only role for Rorqual mining is mining moon ore rocks at Athanors and Tataras, and then the complete elimination of noxium from Nullsec.
That's a big deal, because you used to think, you used to hear that, the money was in the ABCs of mining. And
They just took the C's away.
And they took the C's away. Yeah. So that's a big change.
So as I made my public blog about, I don't know this is going in the right direction. But what Sadus was saying, what it'll do is lead to, rather than people creating and selling locally there's going to be a much greater incentive to send all the ore to JITA, put it on the market, and then haul all the ore back out of JITA or Amar into wherever it's needed. And so the question that's open for everyone to decide is that a healthy thing for Eve? Will that lead to more conflict in Eve? Will that lead to a change in the map of Eve? Those are the kind of questions that I think it's for everyone to discuss. But those are the announced changes, and what's happening right now, what you're seeing the market react to is Rorqual mining of asteroids is basically gone. Noxium is not in Nullsec. And then the likelihood that further moon distributions will all change, which again, to an individual player, they may be renting a specific moon at a price because of what they think the outcome is. And now they're having to decide, is it still going to be worth what I paid for it? Is it still going to be worth the investment I made? And so you have individuals concerned at the same level of coalitions because of the uncertainty. So you're seeing the market in tumult right now.
Very interesting. The secondary points.
In the dev blog, they said that the moon rocks were going to have their ore amounts adjusted. Was it going to go up or down for the common ore inside the moon rock?
That is big.
As I read the public announcement, there's going to be no more asteroid ore dropped when a moon explodes. So if you don't do moon mining, when when a moon chunk is exploded, there's two kinds of asteroids that are formed. There's the moon ore asteroids that have the materials you use to make T2 materials, and then there's a version of standard asteroid ore that just makes minerals. Typically, people would mine. Typically, people would only mine the moon ore because it had the most value. Occasionally, if there was a spodumene or a gneiss, people would mine that because it has good value. But some of the other ore wasn't viewed as worth the time to mine. Even with some people didn't view it at the time before. Now, per the announcement, it's all going to be gone. So you will have.
I was wondering specifically about the moon rocks do generate titanium and pyrite, and they said they were going to adjust that. And maybe I'm being hopeful. Yeah, I'm like, maybe they'll give us more, but probably not.
Well, I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but I know that the amount of I buy billions of moon ore all the time because I do T2 industry, and the amount of minerals you get is trivial compared to any other asteroid ore you buy. So unless they goose that up to make moon ore have more minerals, but I think the trend is to have less mineral availability. So I would be surprised to see that.
Well, here's a question.
Crocite right now. So someone asked, Crocite right now, with it not in Nullsec, the majority source is in Nullsec or lowsec. There is some in highsec, but it's kind of the worst return on your mining. It's pyroxes or something like that you can get noxium in highsec. But the majority of it's going to be in lowsec.
Well, what about?
Excuse me, I have to go take a meeting.
Thanks, Sadus. Okay, thanks for stopping by. What about other sources like missions and wormholes and that kind of stuff? Would you find it in any of those places?
In theory, you could find. You can reprocess modules into minerals. You get a very, very low return. The maximum return you get is 55%, which is pretty bad. And then again, you're faced with this dilemma of, let's say you get all this loot from the NPC rats you kill. You then have to sort through which are the ones that are valuable to sell on the market, like a medium regolith shield extender is probably worth much more selling on the market than reprocessing it. And then even when you reprocess these modules, you're getting very, very small amounts of it. It would take an enormous amount of, as we would call, gun mining to generate what a typical mining, asteroid mining can pull in. So it can help a little bit, but basically you're seeing a huge squeeze on the ability for rorquals to have a role. It may be taken over by mining barges. And then you have a huge squeeze, which to me is the most fundamental thing, is this Noxium not being in Nullsec is going to create a very different economy. And the question I have is this going to lead in the direction that players want of more conflict, more moving of the map, more people in space, that kind of thing? And I think that's for everyone to debate. But I think to me, the Noxium change is far more reaching than anything else that was announced yesterday.
Yeah, that's thank you for clearing that up. I wanted to get the basics out there. I wasn't able to provide them. I haven't read the changes in depth, but I know there's a ton of conversation about these changes that have come through and will come through in the next month.
All right, I got to go. There's somebody at my door here.
Thanks, man.
But I hope that clears up the basics for people, because not everyone's an industrialist or a miner.
All right, thanks. Take care, Dunk Dinkle, CSM member, also a logistics guy for Brave Newbies. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up the show now because it's been about an hour 15. Again, another extended episode because we want to go over this. These changes are far-reaching. I think you understood that from what Sadus and Dunk Dinkle were talking about earlier. These are not your typical changes. And I think not only is it a big change for industrialists, but everything industrialists build informs what FCs use to some degree. If something is too expensive to use as a fleet, it doesn't get used. If something is super cheap as a fleet, it gets looked at a little more. So that is going to influence some of the doctrines that are used out there. For instance, the Typhoon missile boat platform that's out there now is a pretty cheap build, but now the battleships might have a shortage of Noxium in order to build them. Does that make them as cheap and inexpensive to throw away as before? Probably not. So that's how the industry affects the kind of ships that are used, which affects non-industrialist players. The other thing is now the acquisition of resources becomes something that motivates conflict because people are going to look around at sources of it. You may see an increase also in ganking freighter ships that are moving supplies in and out of the trade hubs. You might see that become more lucrative as the shortages start to increase the prices of the minerals moving. There's a lot of different ways that these kinds of changes affect the game, balance the game environment. And it's something that people like Caleb Aranya has been looking for. Those are mineral redistributions and shortages causing people to have to want to fight each other and causing interdependence, which creates what is called the trust problem, if you want to call it a problem, where people have to work with each other even if they don't like each other, or they have to figure out how to get what they need from other people, whether it be through war and violence or through diplomacy and trade negotiations. And that makes the landscape a lot more interesting. When people are self-contained in their region, all they need to do is build up walls and live. But when you can't live because you need something, then you have to go out and get it and import it, or you have to go out and conquer it. And so that creates landscape and movement out there. So we've been looking for these changes for a while. Again, especially Caleb, who's been championing those changes for the last year. I don't know if he's satisfied with these changes, but we will see. They're not fully implemented and they're not fully designed, it looks like. We just know there's going to be a shortage phase, a redistribution phase, and then a dynamic distribution phase. And so what that means is they're going to stop the mineral from being available. I think you're seeing that. Then they're going to redistribute it, which they might be doing next month with this, meaning the Noxium disappears. So that means its distribution is somewhere else, some other point. And then the dynamic distribution, I think that's going to be interesting to see. We'll have to see what that's about. Dynamic might mean that it moves around, that you actually see shortages in certain regions depending on how much they're actually farmed, causing people to have to go and mine somebody else's territory, which will obviously cause problems if there's no diplomats there to smooth things over. So we'll see what happens there. But again, these changes are big deal. And geopolitical, the last thing I'll say is geopolitically, ratting income is exploding in OASA. Mining income has just been nerfed all to hell, and that was what Delve was ahead in. So does that cause Delve to want to either disrupt OASA, or does it want it to turn up the heat on ratting in their own systems? Who knows how this affects that kind of political balance. But when you're looking at the empires and their economics and where they're excelling, who's getting richer and who's now stagnating, all that is called into question in the last patch. So February and now in March, you're going to see some major changes coming. Okay, I want to thank everybody for showing up today, especially Sadus, who popped in and helped me out with some talk. And also especially CSM member Dunk Dinkle, who gave us some information on what these changes actually look like. We're around all day long in Discord. So that's Talking in Stations Discord. You can get to it through talkinginstations.com. And we will have a podcast out Tuesday. And don't forget, on Sunday, we will have CCP here to answer some of these big questions that a lot of people are kicking around right now. But stay tuned for more information all week, and then especially Sunday on Talking in Stations. For now, that's all we got. We're going to go ahead and raid Torvald Uros again, who's always got an action-packed stream for you as he battles all kinds of different things, either other players in arenas or NPCs, or roams around. So you never know. Okay, take care, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.